Hey class, I want to discuss making histograms and frequency tables, and we're going to do this just like your topic 6 DQ1 and DQ2, first by hand and then using formulas. In this particular case, I'm not using a template, so you're given a template that makes some of this easier for you. But I want to take this data here and basically make a graphical representation of it that tells us something. Okay, so let me just do it, and then we can look and see what we get, and then we can understand what we get in the end. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do in doing this by hand is I'm going to take this data here and sort it. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight this, and I'm going to choose sort here. Okay, now it knows that this grades is a title for this column. Sometimes that can be a little bit confusing, and you can just do it so that you're choosing the column letter itself, A. Also in your sheet, you have two columns here. You have state names and you have temperatures. The data you're looking at is always going to be numeric when you're making a frequency table or histogram. So well, at least when you're making a histogram, the data's got to be numeric. Um, so you're really there, even there, you're just looking at the temperatures. It's just then it's associated with the name on the side. Anyway, let's sort this and let's sort this from smallest to largest like that. Okay, now here we can just look. So when I do it by formulas, I'm going to do all this stuff using formulas. But here I can say, okay, the min here is 51.02. The max here is, come down here and look, 94.56. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this data and we're going to put it into things that we call bins. So we're going to make intervals. And we want to make sure all the data gets into the intervals, and we want to kind of split them up. We're going to do it so that we split them up into intervals that all have the same length, and so we're going to call that the bin width. Okay. So there's a natural thing associated to the. Oops, this should be min. There's a natural notion associated to the min and the max, and that's called range. So let me just. All right, the range is the difference between these two things. And let's see, I guess we can do this by hand too, right? So 94.56 minus 51.02 is going to be 43.54. Okay, so it wouldn't hurt to, if you want to use a calculator for something like that, that's fine. But that just tells us the distance from the smallest value to the largest value. And we're going to make this thing with, say, let's have 5 bins. I think in your work you actually have 6 bins, but I'm going to have 5. So let's have, I'm going to call something here the bin width. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to make this data and take it and split it, split it evenly into 5 pieces, and then sort of get frequencies and draw the histogram from that thing. Okay, so the natural thing to do, now here I'm going to just use the fact that this is a calculator. You could on the side do this in the calculator, right? So the total range is this 43.54. I could just take this and divide by 5. The problem with that is I want to make sure I get this first element. I want to make sure I get this last element. There's a little bit of tricky stuff we have to talk about when we sort of decide what to do with endpoints. So I'll try to make this clear. Now here we're just creating this, so we can actually kind of massage this by hand a little bit. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go down down from this top value to just 51. I'm just going to make it look nice and go to just have this be an integer value. Okay, and for my max, and this isn't really the min and the max. This is just going to be where our bins start. And I'm going to go up here to 95. So I'm going to make sure that I get those 2 points. And then my range, doing it like this will be what, 44, right? Okay, so that's a little bit nicer. And I'm going to divide by 5. Okay, unfortunately, that's not so nice. So 4 over 5. Okay, that turns out to be 8.8. Since we're doing this by hand, I would like it to be maybe a little bit nicer. So let's do 9. Okay, we'll make it easy on us. Okay, so these are actually the values I'm going to use. This is the bin width I'm going to use here is 9, not 8.7. Okay, and then we're going to start our bins. So let me just call this here bins. And whoops, bins. And the bin is going to have a low end point and a high end point. And so we're going to start here at this min, so 51. Actually, let me label these so low and high. Okay, so we start at 51 here, and then then the width of the bin is 9, so we're gonna go to 51 plus 9, which is 60, right? And the next bin is gonna start right at 60, no space there, right, and go up to 69. Okay, and the next bin is gonna start at 69, again, no space there, and it's gonna go up to 78. Notice I'm just adding 9 each time, right? And then we're going to go from 78 to 87, okay? And then we're going to go from 87, and by the way, this will be our 5th bin here if we look right, and this is going to go up to 96, right? So by increasing this to 9, we actually go a little bit above the 95 that I had there, okay? And just to make sure, this is bin 1, bin 2, bin 3, 4, and 5, right? So those are 5 bins. Okay, and what we want to do now is we want to count how many of these data points fall between 51 and 60? And here's where there's a little bit of trickiness, right? So what does between 51 and 60 mean? So it literally means greater than 51. The way we do this is greater than 51 and less than or equal to 60. Okay, so the issue there is if we had something that fell right on 60, it's going to fall in this bin, not in this bin, right? So maybe let me change a couple of these just to make this actually happen. Let's see, we don't have an 80. What do I have? 78. Yeah, here. So let me make this one actually 78 so we can see how that actually affects things. Okay. So you don't get to do this in yours. You don't change the data. I'm doing this just for teaching here. Okay, so now we want to count, right? And so I'm going to do this by actually highlighting. This is the reason we sorted, so I can do this easily. So how many things are between 51 and 60? Well, actually, there's only one, right? So this is actually easy. I'm going to just color that this gray color. So here I'm going to color the same gray color, and I'm going to say there's one thing there, right? What about between 60 and 69? So those are these. Notice we don't take this one over here, right? And this is one reason you can't. Here, let me indicate this too. So let's color it first. Okay, so it's kind of a blue. Oh, it doesn't show up very much. Let me color it something else. Let's color it this yellow, orange color or reddish color. If I were to take this and get rid of the decimal places, oops, what's it doing? Okay, it doesn't like having the grades there, I guess. Okay, let's try here. There we go. All right. Then you have to be careful, right? Because it looks like these two things would be in there, right? And you would actually count these incorrectly, right? So you want to be careful with, you want to show enough decimals to make sure you're not accidentally counting things incorrectly. Okay, so we're going to count these as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so there's 7 of these things here. And we're coloring it that color, right? And then we're going to go from 69 to 78. So notice this is bigger than 69, so that's right. Up to, now here we're going to include 78, right? Because we're going up everything, bigger than 69 and less than or equal to 78, right? So the 78 goes in this bin, not in this bin. Okay, so this is important, right? When you have those sort of edge cases like that, it becomes important. So let's count these. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So there's 9 in there. Okay, and then we just keep going, right? So now we're going from 78 through 87. Now we don't count the 78 in this bin, right? We go above the 78 and we go through 87, which will be right there. And so let's color these, this color, that color, and let's count those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 again. Okay, that was accidental. Whoops, 9 there. And then we have everything left over. So there's 4 things left over. Let's go ahead and color those green. Okay, so we have this green and we have 4. Okay, so this is called our frequency. Right? Okay, so that's frequency. We could also compute relative frequency. Let's see. So how many things do I actually have? Well, I waste one number up there with the grades. I have 31, so I actually have 30 things, right? So the number of items here, so I could put this here as count, is 30, right? There's 30 items here, right? So if I wanted to do relative frequency, and this is a common thing to do with histograms. then I could do equal to 1. Well, I'm going to use the calculator for this because I don't want to divide by hand 30 things into 3, right? So it'd be 1 over 30, right? And I'm going to put that, in fact, just to make this easier, since now I'm using a formula, I'm not even going to type in the 1. I'm going to go ahead and refer to it there, right? And I'm going to put the little dollar sign so that all works out. Okay, so there, right? So those are relative frequencies, and we can make those a little prettier by looking at them as percentages. And then if you want to add a decimal place, you can add a decimal place like that, right? So those would be the corresponding relative frequencies. Notice that these things here, if I sum them all up, will add up to the count, right? And these things here, when I sum them all up, will add up to 100% because it's everything. Okay, so in other words, 3.3% of this data falls between 51 and 60, 23.3% falls between 60 and 69, right, etc. That's what this is showing here. Okay. Okay, so this is the frequency table part of this, and now we can make the actual histogram. Now on the next page, we're going to do this using formulas, but here I'm just going to type these things in. So I'm going to type in the bins. I'm going to type in the right-hand side of the bin, the 60, the 69, this side over here, not this side over here. So I'm going to type in 60, 69, 78, 87, 96. Okay, so these are our bins, and unfortunately these sort of set over to the right. So we're thinking of this like thing as the interval. This is kind of like the interval from 51 to 60. All right, and this is kind of the interval from 60 to 69. This is kind of the interval from 69 to 78. And notice that 60 is in this interval and 69 is in that interval. Okay, so this is kind of giving us the right picture here. And our frequencies go from 1 to 9. Okay, so let's put in here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like that. Okay, so these will be our counts over here. And I'm just going to make these colors match up. So over here I have, whoops, didn't mean to click that. I have this gray color. Okay, and then I have 7 items here, and that was my sort of reddish color. And then I have 9 items here, which is this blue color. There. And then I have 9 items here, which is a yellow color. Okay, and then I have 4 items over here, which is that green color. Okay, if you want, you can put a number in here just to, I don't know how it accidentally made this red. Okay, I can put a number in there just to indicate the height. Okay, so here I had 7, here I had 9, 9, and this should be 4. Yeah, 4. Okay, and just center those. Okay, so there's sort of a nice frequency histogram. Okay, I could do the relative frequency histogram, right? And instead of labeling this with numbers like 1 to 1 to 9, I would label it with percentages, right? And then these would be labeled with the corresponding percentages. Okay, since this is discrete, sort of counting, it's easier to use these numbers here like that. Okay, so this is the sort of thing you do for your by hand version of the histogram. Okay. And you can look at this and say, well, okay, now we have this picture, right? So we have this picture of this thing, and I can say, okay, how many things are between 69 and 87, and well, that would be these 2 intervals here, right? So I'd sort of say, okay, well, let's see how many things are there. So 18 of these things would be in there, right? Or if I had the percentages, I would say 60% of the stuff is between there, right? Okay, so that's kind of how you read these things. And notice there shouldn't be any space between these bars because you're actually kind of reading this as like almost like the area underneath, this sort of curve thing here, right? So the area of this, right, is 60% of the total area of this whole thing. That's kind of what you're reading there. Okay, that's doing it by hand. So let's go back and I'll do it with formulas. Okay. So here we're going to do the same sort of thing. So max, min, bin width. By the way, I chose 5 bins here totally at random. You could choose something else if you were making your own histogram. Some of this is just design, right? So the formulas here are kind of nice. Max, that's fine. I'll start with max on top. Why not? Okay, so max is just literally the word max, and then the data. And so it's A2 through A31. Remember that. Okay, and the min equals min. Okay, it was A2 through A31, like that. The bin width. Again, I want to go a little bit below this and a little bit above that. Okay, so what I'm going to do here for bin width is I'm going to do the max plus 1, just to give myself a little room at the top. Okay, in fact, let me just write it like that and put some extra parentheses here. And for the bottom, I'm going to do the min minus 1. Okay, and then we're going to divide that whole thing by 5. Okay, and divide by 5, like that. Okay, so now we're getting 9.108 for our bin width here. Okay, so these numbers are a little different from our previous numbers, and we could format them. Again, here you have to be a little bit careful. Now, Excel knows these exact numbers, but we could format these like that if you wanted to. All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave 2 decimals so we can actually see what's going on a little bit in here. Okay, so now I'm going to set this up just as before. So I'm going to have bins. I'm going to have low and high. I'm going to just call this bins. Okay, we're going to have 5 bins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Okay, so for the low value, we're going to take this thing, and I'm going to go down by that 1 again that I had, so that we get below that minimum value. Otherwise, we won't count it. That's important. All right, and then for this value here, so now we're using formulas, right? So I'm going to say we'll take this value here and add the bin width, which is right there. Okay, so like that. Okay, now this formula I want to just copy down because I'm always going to just take this and add the bin width. Okay, so I don't want that reference to change, so I'm going to put the little dollar sign in there. And I can actually just go ahead and fill this out like that. Now it's interpreting these as zeros right now. Okay, now remember this one here just needs to be the value that was there, right? And that just persists on the way down, so I can just now copy this down. And so we get that, right? So now our bins are like this, from 50 to 59.13, 59 to 68, etc. Right? Those are our bins, like that. Okay, so here we're doing it with formulas, right? This just points at the min, well, the min minus 1, right? Because I wanted to go down a little bit. The bin width has sort of added 1 to the top and subtracted 1 from the bottom. So definitely we're going to get all this data inside here, and we're dividing by 5. So I'm just adding the bin width each time. Over here, I'm just copying this, right? So that's what this formula does, right? And then here we're just, taking the thing to the left and adding the bin width, right? And so again, the only formulas we entered this, we entered that, and the rest were autofill, right? Okay, here's the perhaps tricky thing. Let me just type something in here. Let's type literally something, because here's a place where you could make a mistake. So now we're going to get the frequency. Okay, so the way we do the frequency here in Excel is we're going to say equal frequency, like that. It says we look at our data array, so that's all this stuff here. Okay, and then we're going to look at our bins array, and what we're going to do is look at the high end of the bins, but not all the way down to here, just to everything but that last one. Okay, so this is important. I'll show you why in just a minute. So I do that. So I've entered in one formula up there, and hit enter, and it fills in all these, right? So it's actually counting. So there's one thing over here between 50.02 and 59.13. There's 4 things between 59.13 and 68.24. And remember, this is counting everything bigger than this and less than or equal to that. That's the way this is counting. If I were to include all the way down to this 95.56, then this operation would want to stick something into the cell. Let me see what actually happens. Sometimes it gives an error and sometimes it does it. So let's go down to 15. See, and it says spill because it went and tried to stick something into a cell that had something there already. So if you see this error, that's probably what happened. You've probably included too many of these things here, and it's trying to stick something into something where you have some words already in here or something else already in there. Okay, so go ahead and put that back. Okay, so there's our frequency, relative frequency. Oops. All right, this is exactly what I did before. So here I'm going to just say, the count is still 30, right? But here I can actually compute it. So let's go ahead and compute it. So equals sum of these things. All right, and this will be 30. That'll be the total, right? So the relative frequency will be equal to this value here divided by that thing. And I'm going to put the $sign so I can copy down. Okay, so the table's similar. I think it's a little bit different. Percent. Okay, go ahead and put a couple decimal places there, right? So we have 1, 4, 11, 9. Yeah, definitely different, right? Before we had, 1799. Okay, so that's because our bins are actually a little bit different, right? These are different bins than the ones we had here, right? So here we're counting between 60 and 69. Here we're counting between 59.13 and 68.24, right? So there's only 4 instead of 7. So you might see differences between your two sheets as well. Okay. Okay, now the nice thing here is that this will change, right? If I had to go in, like if this was really sort of looking at some student scores, right, and I wanted to go in here and change, oh, this person really made a 75.6 after making corrections, right? So I make that correction, and whatever here changes. I guess that one didn't actually change. Let's pick one that changes. Let's choose like there's a 68.18. Let's say this guy became a 71.23. Okay, and you saw this changed, right? So that's the way we want this to behave. So this data changes, this frequency table changes automatically, the histogram we make will change automatically, everything will change automatically. Also, this is really useful if there's, a million points here and you wouldn't want to do what we did by hand over here, right? We want Excel to do all this work for us. Okay, so the final thing is how do we make the actual table? Okay, so the actual table is going to be really easy. I'm just going to highlight either the frequency or the relative frequency. Really doesn't matter which one. Let's just do the frequency. Okay, and we'll just do insert. And you can get fancy with this. I'm going to do a really simple one. Oops, not histogram. We're going to insert actually this 2D column. Okay, it is true that Excel will do histograms for you, but here we want you to build them yourself. Okay, so one thing about this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not what we want down here. So we're going to come up here and do this select data. Okay, I'm going to edit this and I'm going to put in, here I'm just going to use the high ends of the bins is what I'm going to do. Okay, so it's going to be like that. Okay. The next thing is you don't want this gap because when we're actually using this thing, we want to think of this as like the area underneath this thing, right? And so these gaps just make that interpretation all wrong. So we're going to click on this format data here. And we're going to get rid of this gap width. We're going to make it 0, right? So it does like that. If you want to see the little bars a little bit, we can come in here and choose border and choose solid line and do something like that. Now you can get fancier and fancier with your charts. All right, and then here, these are supposed to be like the right end endpoints of the bins. So I think I can try to shift these to the right. So yeah, so it's like that, right? So this is like 59.13 is like that cutoff. 68.24 is that cutoff, right? So if I wanted to know, oh, and then the other thing is we can put labels, right? So you can add labels here. And then that adds the little counts. Notice that those matches with those counts there, right? So if I wanted to know like how many values were greater than 59.13 and less than or equal to 77.34, well, I would just add up the numbers in those two things, right? And those two numbers there, that would be these two, right? So that would be actually 50% of the data, right? So 50% of the area of this whole blue shape is in these two bits, right? So that's kind of the way you think about this. Anyway, this is how you do the frequency table right there and the histogram by using Excel formulas.